this whole game, Baylor's going to be driving back to Waco while I do. So about 5 minutes left to go in the game, I'm like, I got to get going. Like I jumped up and was like, I'm out of here. And so he's like, oh, really? Why? I'm like, because I'm going to get on I-35 with 40,000 people coming back to Waco. I don't want to do that. So I jumped in the car and got out of there. I figured by the time it was a pretty close game, so it would have taken them a little bit to walk to their cars and everything. So I think I beat them. I was listening to the game on the radio, and I was like, okay, I think I'm okay. Yeah. But, so I ran out of there so I didn't get stuck in Baylor, Texas traffic. Anyway. Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to see you guys this morning. How are you? Are you well? You good? Well, it's been a busy couple of weeks. Church, boy, it's been really busy the last several weeks. Sunday night was fun. I thought we had a good gathering here for the Thanksgiving get-together. That was fun. I had about 220 people, I think, showed up to that. That was good. And we'll end up raising a couple of $1,000s for the pastors' conference in Mexico. I think with that money, what we will probably do is buy study Bibles and commentaries for the book of Hebrews. John MacArthur's, all of his New Testament commentaries have been translated into Spanish. And so I think we'll get we're going to do the book of Hebrews in the summer. So I think we'll do is buy MacArthur's Hebrews commentary for every pastor, and then also buy a collection of study Bibles. Yes. Yes. And yes. We're going to Vallehermoso is where we do our study. Yeah. Why are you suggesting it's dangerous? Yes, of course. It's incredibly dangerous. Yeah, no, it's always dangerous going there. In fact, the scariest I've ever been was Juarez during the height of the drug war there. I was taking a truck that our church had donated to this pastor to help him with his ministry. And so we left the truck on the U.S. side because you have to get it permitted first before you move it in. And so we took all the paperwork to this guy in Mexico, in Juarez, and I count out $1,000 in U.S. cash. And I'm thinking to myself, if anyone knows that I still have change, because at the time, Juarez there was like 30 murders a weekend, and I was like, we're dead. So, and that was the same weekend that we're going to go from there down to Constitution to this pastor's conference, and I had an expired visa. I had mishandled the visa stuff with the Mexican government. And we had one person go on a trip one time that they had an expired visa, and they wanted, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but they wanted $10 a day, and the lady's visa was about 300 days old. So they wanted $3,000 or something like that. Or maybe it was $5 a day. They wanted $1,500 from her. She finally talked them down to a $100 fine and let them restate it. But so I have this visa in my passport that I know is expired. It's a long story how it happened. It's kind of my fault, a little bit my fault because I let a guy at the checkpoint talk me into something when I should have said, no, just stamp me out. You're trying to save me $5. I don't care. Just stamp me out. And he goes, no. You still have months left on this. You can come in and out. Don't stamp this out because you can't. I should have said, no, stamp me out. I'm not coming back. But what I thought was, we're flying to Mexico in a couple of months. Well, flight visas are not the same as the driving visa. So it didn't count. The flight visa was its own visa. They stamped that in and stamped me back out when I got back on the plane in Tampico. And so the drive visa stayed open. So it's now expired by 180 days. I'd gone through the math, and I'd given all my money to some dude at a house in Juarez. So we get to this checkpoint, and I'm supposed to go in and to the checkpoint and get the visa and all that. I'm like, I'm going to get in so much trouble. Well, the guy that's driving me doesn't speak any English. Okay, he and his wife, they don't speak English. And I'm told him up front, I'm worried about this visa, I'm going to have to work on this. So we get to the checkpoint, and the car, there are two cars in front of us. They check everyone's passport in the car. They get them out of the car, put them back in the car, drive the car in front of us, check everyone's visa, passport, get them all out of the car, check them all, put them out. We pull up, the guy looks in it, and he goes, and just waved us on. All right, so about 2 miles after that, there's a military checkpoint. They're checking every single car, pulling everyone out of the car, checking everyone's visa, passport, paperwork. They did this for every car, every car. We pull up, they look in real quick, and they waved us on. So the guy driving turns to me and goes, see, no problem. And I'm like, okay. Well, the problem is we still have to come back out, okay? So we still have to come back out, and there's real risk here that they're going to be like, you were in past the checkpoint without a valid visa. They could arrest me now. Now I could get arrested. We come back, same checkpoint. I've been in this checkpoint a million times. Like, I've been to this place a ton of times. But anyway, come back to the same checkpoint. Every car, 5 cars in front of us, when we pull in there, every single one of them, they check every single paperwork. They get them out of the car. They check the entire car, put them back in the car, send them on the way. One guy, they pull over. We come up. The guy goes, and waved us on. And the guy turned to me and said, see, no problem. I was like, I cannot believe what just happened. I should have gone to jail. Huh? Yeah, it was the pastor that we gave the truck to. Yeah. Either that or divine providence. It just felt like God just went, look, you're in the spot. There's nothing you can do about it. If you get pulled over right now, you're going to get arrested. It's not worth it. You have stuff to do. So they just sent me on. And so when I got back to the U.S., I lost that passport. I bought a new one. And I reported it lost. Got a new passport. That way that visa wouldn't be stamped in there. So the next time I went to Mexico, it was clean. So, which I did periodically anyway. I didn't want India. I found out if you have a bunch of visa stamps in there at checkpoints, they get really bent out of shape. So I found that it's better for me to not lose it or get a new one. And so, So sometimes it's, like how it's really cool you have all these stamps in your passport. It's terrible. If you're trying to get into India and Myanmar and stuff like that, no, it's a terrible thing. You want them to open up like, oh, your first time out of the country. Yeah. So, So you try to make it look like you're the first time tourist, that kind of thing. Huh? Yeah, Rio Bravo actually this time. Villahermosa is, we've done several conferences there. That one's about an hour south of Reynosa, around that area. And then Rio Bravo, they'll put in their own bridge finally. The first 2 times I went to Rio Bravo, you had to cross at Progreso and then drive these back roads to get to Rio Bravo, which was scary because there was all kinds of kidnappings and everything. And I'm driving with a U-Haul full of stuff, just terrible ideas. Or a big trailer. I had this church trailer with me with a bunch of stuff in it. No, we did some dumb things. It was crazy. I'll tell you about the time we had a bunch of our people detained. We were bringing some clothes in, and used clothes is a big market, and so you're not supposed to do this kind of thing. Now I know, so it's not, okay, do other stuff. But so we'd brought in some clothes, and then we brought in another set of clothes, and me and Ruben are doing the conference, but y'all don't even know the Morenos, but Eli and Anna Moreno, and Ruben Del Torre's wife, Maylida's with them, and we have 2 other people, and Roberto, Mexican pastor, is with them, and they take Eli's truck, they take the pastor's vehicle, they get in them, they drive them from the Progreso Bridge all the way to Reynosa, and they put them in holding cells. They got machine guns pointed at them and everything. Well, the whole drive there, they put all the women in one car and a female driver, and all the guys in a car and a male driver. And the whole ride there, Anna's telling the female driver, she's just hammering her with the gospel. And the whole ride there, Eli's just sharing the gospel with the guy driving him. And so they get to Reynosa, and obviously the sharing of the gospel had a big impact on these individuals because they went out and bought our group dinner, got them drinks, felt terrible for them. And so our guys are there, and they're just praying together. It's very tense. They called us, like, come get us. I'm like, I don't think me showing up is a good idea. This is not going to help matters at the border. Like, oh, look, it's an American pastor. We should listen to him. Like, I don't think that's how this is going to work. And so we're at the pastor's conference, and we start praying for them. And what happens is they have these drug-sniffing dogs at the border on both sides. And this car pulls in, and the dogs go crazy. And if you're a border agent, this is awesome. Like, this is super fun, okay? You can tell they get super stoked about it. So these the Mexican officials there, they go, all right, and they start taking the car apart, and sure enough, they find drugs in the panel of the car. And so they take these two guys who are importing drugs illegally and throw them in the bin with our guys. And Anna says to him, like, are you serious? Said to the person who had already gotten us dinner, said, are you seriously going to leave these individuals? You're mad at us for doing sharing the gospel, bringing Bibles in, and bringing some clothes in for some Mexican pastors, and you put us in the same cell with these guys. And the guy goes, you're right. You guys just get out of here. Okay, so here's the church van, the trailer, Eli's truck, okay? And so Eli gets out there, and they'd empty the trailer, okay? Because they're mad at us for importing clothes. Eli gets out there, and he goes, well, we're not leaving this stuff here. And he reloads the entire trailer, closes it up, and drives off. He left them 4 bins of children's clothes because they'd asked about children's clothing for their own kids. So he's like, well, just leave them children's clothes here, and that way that's there, and then we'll take the rest into the Mexican pastors. So I get back from this trip. Well, this is over a decade ago. We don't tell anyone at the church what happened, because I just knew people would be like, you are never doing that again. So we've run into so many dramas like that, though, at the border. I don't know. Some of them really stressful. Some of them almost comical. We had the federales, who are more like military, are different than the border people. Like, there's border and immigration people, but then there's just general military police type people. And we had one guy. There's a long line coming in the U.S. on a Sunday or Saturday. It's really long. People come in and shop both directions. It's fine. It's cool. I mean, people go to Walmart from Mexico, or people come from the U.S. to go down and shop in Mexico. Both things. You go get dental work. Best, cheapest way to get your dental work done. You go to some of those towns just the other side of the border, little bitty town, there's hardly anyone there, and there's 3 dentists. And they do good work. You need a tooth filled, you can get it done for about $40 there, and they do good work. So I'm saying, there's a lot of Americans, I'm not paying $400 here, I'm going to do it for $40 there. So not a bad deal. We're waiting in line, and this federale, he's got his machine gun, and hammers on the door. And I want to look, inspect. Reuben's talking to him. Opens the door, and we have a box of Bibles. And Reuben tells him, he's like, these are Bibles. We're here because we're believers in Jesus Christ, and we're trying to encourage people both in the U.S. and in Mexico to have faith in Christ. And the federale said this. He goes, does it really work? And he said this. He goes, my sister became a Christian about 3 years ago, and she's been telling me about Jesus. He's like, does this stuff really work? And Reuben just laid the gospel out to him, and we go, here, take a Bible. And he gave him a Bible, and he set it down on his backpack, took the Bible. And so you just have encounters like that, and you go, hey, I'd like to be pulled over by a federale every day, if that's the case, right? An opportunity to share the gospel. But anyway, those were some wild days, man. So I want to get back to Mexico, though. I'm missing the Rio Bravo pastors. I've had a lot of great encounters there, so many encouraging things, some really hard things, too. A few years ago when we were down there, Kim, doing the medical clinic, and there's a young couple. They've been married maybe 4 or 5 years. They really wanted to have a child. They'd miscarried a couple of times. And they came to Kim like, why are we miscarrying? Which is like, in the world, it's all over the map of why things like that happen. I mean, there's no simple solution. They're really distraught. And so Kim and Kim said Anna just prayed the most beautiful prayer over them. A year later, they show up to the conference with their brand new baby. It was crazy. And it was like, we had a baby. Anna and Kim were just going, whoa, that was pretty crazy. Just prayed over them the year before, and they just told Anna and Kim their whole story about how, we'd come to the conference. We were so stressed out about it, and we finally just went, okay, look, let's just trust God with this. You guys prayed over us to trust God with this. We need to trust God with this. And they said within a couple of months they were pregnant. They just had the baby a month before the conference and brought the kid with them. And so it was a real celebratory thing. So we just had a lot of those kinds of experiences, and I'm really ready to get back. And like I said, we raised enough money on Sunday night to where I think we can buy study Bibles for every pastor and commentaries on the book of Hebrews for every pastor. We bought other commentaries before. I remember one time down in an area near Tampico. So really kind of in the heart of Mexico too. We went about 3 hours from Tampico into the heart of Mexico. And we were giving out the book of Ephesians commentary in Spanish, MacArthur's Ephesians commentary. And one of the pastors we handed it out. Later on, he told Reuben, he goes, outside the Bible is the first book I've ever had about anything with theology or the Bible in it. Reuben's like, whoa, that's pretty insane. Now, again, you can pastor a church without John MacArthur's commentaries, but I'm just saying, for him to be able to read something theological in Spanish was really cool. And then we were able to download a bunch of sermons, by the way, in Spanish. Really good, translated sermons by individuals, and we gave them thumb drives of a bunch of sermons that we were able to get our hands on. So that was cool, too. And so, so we're looking forward to going back. This is all independent Baptist churches. Southern Baptist planted churches are really liberal in Mexico. And so these independent Baptist churches, they're friendly towards them, but they don't share a lot of the same priorities. And so a lot of these independent Baptist churches, we found that they're a little bit more consistent theologically with where we are. Teach the Bible line by line, firm belief in the gospel, all those kinds of things. And we have about 45 or 50 of those churches in the Rio Bravo, Harlingen, Reynosa area that we partner with. And they're all pastors of little bitty churches, anywhere from 20 or even 15 people to sometimes churches as big as a couple of hundred. I mentioned Luciano last week. He had surgery and everything. He's doing a lot better. But his church is pretty good size. I think they run a couple of hundred. And like Tomas's church, where we host the conference, they run about 100. And Roberto's church in Vallehermoso, they run about 50. So they're pretty good sized churches. And so, but our goal is to try to provide theological encouragement and training, and also to bring them together for mutual support and encouragement. And so, we're going to go back this summer. And there for a while, it got so dangerous, just me and Reuben would go. Or me, Reuben, and Kim would go. That was it. We weren't willing to take anyone else because it got so dangerous that we just said, we're not taking the risk. But now it's gotten a little better. So, can't wait to get back. All right, well, we're in the book of Revelation. And Revelation chapter 7, we're going to look through 9 through 17. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. And they cry out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, These who are clothed in white robes, who are they, and where have they come from? I said, My Lord, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones who have come out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in the temple. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tabernacle over them. They will hunger no longer, nor thirst any more, nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb is the center of the throne, will be their shepherd, and will guide them to springs of water of life, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Now, that last phrase, God will wipe every tear from their eyes, really provides us with at least a potential backdrop or setting for this entire situation. Well, where have you heard this phrase before in the book of Revelation? You familiar with this statement? He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Yeah, it's at the very end. We have a new heaven, a new earth, a new Jerusalem that has come down. God has tabernacled now among his people. There would be no longer any death or mourning, no more tears. He will wipe every tear from their eye. This is allowed for some to kind of look at this as this is a future-looking event where John is being able to peer into this final gathering of the saints. And the reason for this is that this interlude is all dealing with this one question that comes out of the end of Revelation chapter 6. The question is, who is able to stand before the Lamb? Remember how the individuals are praying or crying out, let the rocks fall on us, for that's better than standing before the Lamb. So chapter 7 opens into this little interlude, which is like, okay, well, there's these 4 angels. They're holding back the winds. There's this 144,000. That 144,000 seem like they're sent into the world. There's they bring maybe a lot of people into saving faith because of their witness. And then this group is the individuals that maybe came to saving faith because of their testimony. And this is John now looking to the very end of time where that whole tribulational period, all the people that either died during the tribulation or came all the way through it, either way, have now gathered before the Lamb. And so this is maybe a future-looking thing where John is seeing an answer to this question, this like interlude in the Revelation of who can stand, answer. Well, God's going to send out a protected group of individuals and withhold his judgment on the earth so their gospel can reach the world. And a bunch of millions and millions of people are going to believe and be gathered into that, and they're going to come into a place of worship before the Lamb, and this will be the end of all things. God will wipe away every tear from their eye, just like we see at the very end of the Revelation. So it's like a temporary look into that as he's answering this question, who is able to stand? I think that's not a bad look at this. A lot of the language does have that kind of end, final conclusion type language to it. So we're going to take a look at some of those things. And so today, kind of the divine preparation of the saints for the great and terrible tribulation and to bring them through them, his promises to bring them through them. Now, I wanted to answer something. You asked me last week, what is historical premillennialism and topological preterism? I wanted to define it, okay, because you caught me and I was like, okay, and then I gave you the wrong answer. All right, because you asked me why historical. I gave you why typological preterism with premillennialism. The reason historical is put in front of there is that a lot of individuals have noted that all the early church fathers are premillennial. So when it's called historical premillennialism, this is a reference to the early church fathers all endorse this particular theological worldview. And I connected it also with the historical events of AD 70, but that's this typological preterism that I embrace. That AD 70 is a real event. And one thing I don't like about premillennialism or dispensationalism is a denial of the Olivet Discourse and AD 70, which I think are real things. And I think really Jesus is talking about that event. That's why he says this generation will not pass till these things happen. Generation usually in Jewish mindset's about 40 years. And if Jesus is saying that in AD 30, and it happens in 80, 70, that's exactly one generation. This generation will not pass away till all these things take place. I think the Olivet Discourse took place, a lot of it took place at 70 AD in the destruction. Not one stone will be left on another, all those kinds of things. That's exactly what happened. Titus completely destroys the city of Jerusalem and the temple, in particular the temple. And so I think the reason I am a typological preterist is that I think we don't want to deny the Olivet Discourse's power and its revelatory power of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So I have the following write-up. Historical premillennialism, topological preterist, does not require a literal 7-year tribulation, though some do. I kind of lean towards a literal 7-year tribulation. Okay? Dispensationalist, it has to be 7 years literal. All right? They hold to a single post-tribulational rapture, too. The other thing with dispensationalists, a lot of times you have multiple comings and goings. You have a pre-tribulational rapture, and then at the end of the tribulation, you have some kind of calling up, calling down, and then you have the millennial reign, and then you have another event. Premillennialism is like there's just one big event, that kind of thing. Typological because this is a close similarity to the end times events and the 70 destruction of Jerusalem that Jesus describes in the Olivet Discourse. All right, so, and historical because so many early fathers held the position. So let's look at the 4 terms. Historical comes from, in history, the early church fathers held this view. Premillennialism is the idea that the rapture will occur before this millennium occurs. But they tend to be post-tribulational rapture. Like at the end, post-tribulational rapture at the end of the tribulation when the rapture occurs. Typological meaning it's similar to the 70 destruction. Preterist meaning the Olivet Discourse stuff about the destruction of Jerusalem did in fact already occur and has already taken place. And Revelation is just a type of that, only it's global. So this is my claim on end time stuff. I'm a historical premillennial typological preterist. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, of course, yeah. There's a dispensationalist is a premillennial, but they have other features. So usually there's two premillennial groups. There's dispensationalists and there's historical premillennialists. And the difference between the two is historical premillennialists are like, let me describe dispensationalists. Dispensationalists say there's dispensations in history that God has dealt with humanity in different ways. Usually 7 of them. And they're divided up, and you have the time period up until the law, you have the time period from the law up until Jesus, you have the church, you have the tribulation, you have the millennial reign, and you have the end, the final end of heaven, or something like that. Like there's these 7 dispensations where God deals uniquely with people. Like during the millennial reign, there's a way in which God will deal with people that's a little bit different than he dealt with them during the church age. Okay, so dispensationalists try to divide these periods of time into specific epochs and how God deals with people there. Dispensationalists also are usually pre-tribulational rapture people, or at worst, mid-tribulational rapture people. That's usually what you see in dispensationalism. And so the distinction then between dispensationalists and premillennialists is premillennialism like, there's one rapture, there's not multiple comings and goings, it happens at the end of the tribulation, and the millennium is just an ushering into this everlasting kingdom, awaiting a final judgment of the devil and his minions, and ushering in the final eternal kingdom, that kind of thing. Whereas in dispensationalism, there's a lot of comings and goings and arrows here and there, and this event happens there, and it's broken into this group here, and there's lots of details that are built into dispensationalism. Now, postmillennials think that we're in the time of the millennium now, an indefinite period of the church age, that the book of Revelation, most of which has already taken place. But there's this 1,000-year reign that's taking place now through the church, that Christ is reigning now through the church. That the destruction of 70 AD shifted from Israel to the Gentile church, and we're in that time period now. That's what postmillennialism teaches. And the idea there is that over time, things will get better and better progressively, and eventually the return of Christ will come. That idea has shaken a lot of postmillennials. So Jonathan Edwards, postmillennial. But D.L. Moody, premillennial, because he went through the Civil War and went, seems like we're bent on killing each other. This is terrible. So that's what drove D.L. Moody towards, in fact, D.L. Moody was the first group of dispensationalists. He started dispensationalism. Not him personally, but he had a theologian, and they would host these conferences on end times, and that guy started dispensational theology in America. It's a very much an American phenomenon, by the way, dispensationalism is. And launched out of D.L. Moody's ministry, but Lewis Sperry Schaeffer moved from Chicago and D.L. Moody to Dallas, started Dallas Theological Seminary, joined immediately by Schofield. So Lewis Sperry Schaeffer, whose systematic theology I highly recommend. It's really good, and it's cheap at Amazon.com or ChristianBook.com. Super cheap. The Systematic Theology of Lewis Sperry Chafer. Really recommend it. It's good. It's good systematic theology book. Lewis Sperry Chafer, and then Scofield. And the Scofield Study Bible is what made dispensationalism a household term and propagated across almost all major conservative evangelicals. Because the Scofield Study Bible had charts and stuff showing dispensationalism in the Bible, in the study notes. And so a lot of people became dispensationalists because they read Scofield's Study Bible. So, yeah. Huge impact on the church. And then the Ryrie Study Bible came out too, and that also has dispensationalism built into the study notes. All right, comments about that? I wanted to clarify that because last week I misspoke, and I wanted to clarify. I confused historical with my typological and flipped them, and I wanted to distinguish. I didn't answer that question well. I apologize. So, yeah. You know, if I get something wrong and I figure it out, I want to fix it. If I get it right, then I got lucky. But if I get it wrong, I want to come back and fix it. And so in this case, I wanted to come back and fix it. So, yeah. All right, any questions about that? All right, now look, I'm not saying you should be one of these. I'm just telling you this is where I'm coming from. If you're post-mill, that's cool. I know post-mill people, and I like them. They're awesome, you know? If you're dispensationalist and you love DTS and you think Scofield's got it right, no problem. There's a lot of people like that. Chuck Swindoll, David Jeremiah, Tony Evans. Those are some pretty big names in Christianity. John MacArthur, he's a dispensationalist. Those are big names in Christianity. And you have John Piper, he's post-mill, and you have R.C. Sproul, who's preterist. Is a dispensationalist. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. There's a whole denominations built around this too. Free evangelicals. You cannot pastor a free evangelical church unless you certify that you are a pre-tribulational rapture dispensationalist. You can't even become the pastor of the church unless you certify that. So free evangelical church. And the most famous free evangelical pastor that I know of is Chuck Swindoll, because he was the pastor of the Free Evangelical Church in Fullerton, California, before he came to become the president of Dallas Theological Seminary, and now pastoring a church. So, yes? No, there are people who are premillennial who may even still hold to a rapture before the tribulation, but don't hold the rest of the dispensational ideas of, they might hold all of the calendaring. Okay, so here, this is a little bit of a distinction. Well, I read a really caustic book about this once called Dispensationalism, Rightly Dividing the Church of God, and it was super caustic. But it was helpful because I got it from the enemy's perspective, so I got to figure out, okay, why are they so mad about this? It's a terrible book. I don't recommend it. I thought it was super caustic. It was not helpful. It was not loving. It wasn't kind. I don't mind people disagreeing in theological world, but you can be kind about it, you know. I don't like theological disagreements where they're nasty about it, okay? So, like, if we're going to disagree over stuff, we should at least be kind about it. But that book was super helpful because I'm like, okay, what is it that dispensationalists believe? Well, I found out, like, what they believe, but, like, from a very caustic way. So here's the deal. You might say, yeah, I can see some of these things in dispensationalism, like from Adam to Abraham and Abraham to Moses and Moses to Jesus and things like that. I can see some of these things that God does operate within the information available at the time. I think dispensationalism makes too big a deal out of it. Because then they try to say, well, see, we have this progressive revelation, so that means that's going to keep happening in the tribulation and in the post-rapture world and in heaven, that there's these, like that whole world of doing that is going to continue. And so I think that's a bit oversold by dispensationalists. But there are people who go, yeah, I see where dispensationalists are coming from. I think when I look at the Bible, I see a lot of the events the way they see them. I just don't hold this God's dealing with humanity as unique in each of those calendaring. So you can have a premillennialist who holds a lot of the calendaring of dispensationalism, but doesn't like some of the dispensational, this is how God deals with people in this epoch, this is how God deals with people in this epoch. And the opposite of dispensationalism, as I found out from this very caustic book, is covenant theologian. A covenant theologian who says there's the old covenant and there's the new covenant, that's it. There are 2 dispensations, not 7. So you can have a premillennial who thinks the calendaring of dispensationalism is right, but there's really only 2 major dispensations, old covenant, new covenant. And that in the tribulation and in the millennial reign and in heaven, it's still all new covenant. There's not like dispensations within it. But like in DTS, I'll give you an example of how this plays out. In DTS, there's Bible Knowledge Commentary on the Sermon on the Mount commentary. So Matthew 5, 6, 7. The writer writes and says this: this is the law, the new law for the millennial reign of Christ. We have some impact on us today because we can glean insights into how the world should work once Christ comes and establishes his earthly kingdom. But it's ultimately, the Sermon on the Mount is written for or spoken for that millennial reign. Now, there's 0 evidence of that. And it's ironic, is in the Bible Knowledge Commentary and Luke on the Sermon on the Mount, and Luke, though it's a Sermon on the Plain, same content, that commentator doesn't say that. He doesn't even bring up the millennial kingdom. Because I immediately went to Luke, is he going to say the same thing? And he didn't say the same thing. So it's that kind of thing that makes people who go, I think dispensationalists, they have some veracity, some of this stuff, but they overplay it. And I think that's right. And that commentary, that reference in that commentary is the greatest example I can give of overplaying your hand. Like you're so fixated on dispensationalism that you get to the Sermon on the Mount and go, this is for the millennial kingdom. I'm like, I think it will work in Grand Prairie in, say, 2022 just fine. You know, like, I don't really think we need the millennial reign of Christ to blessed are the poor in spirit. You know, or when you give alms, do the following, right? I mean, to me, that doesn't seem like millennial language at all. That seems like 1st century AD Jesus language. So that's where I think dispensationalism gets heavy-handed. And so that book the guy who wrote about it, I think he was right about some of his critiques. He just could have been nice about it. And so instead of being nice, it was caustic. And so I walked away from the book going, I don't want to be a covenant theologian if I'm going to be in the group that's mean. Like, I don't want to be mean. So I don't want to be a dispensationalist either if they're going to be mean. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be in the group that holds the general orthodoxy and is at least nice about it. So we should be able to be nice to fellow believers. If there's a professor at DTS, there's no reason for a covenant theologian to be caustic towards them. Seriously. The difference in theology between those 2 groups is so minuscule as to be like we're fighting over about, 40 chapters of the entire Bible, and they're all end time stuff. Almost the rest of it they agree on. So it's like, okay, stop being caustic. All right, sorry, into that. It does bother me when I see that kind of thing. Yes, sir. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not even sure it's a term, by the way, just to be clear on this. If you go looking for it, you may not find it. Well, I'm not saying the idea is unique to me, but I don't know if the title's used anywhere else. No, don't. No, because it will expose me as the theological midget I am. Do not do that. But we're going to write a book. We're going to write a book about, I'm unqualified to write this book. The end. It's a very short book. It's a very short book. Oh, man. They were absolute dyed-in-the-wool dispensationalists. And, they had the Scofield Study Bibles. Well, MacArthur Study Bible does it too, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, either way, they didn't like the MacArthur Study Bible, though, because of that one statement in the gospel in 1 John that MacArthur goes, these older manuscripts are better. And, there's that verse that says there are 3 that testify, the Spirit, the water, and the blood. But the Sinaiticus Vaticanus, the one that the Vatican used and the one that wound up in the King James Version, says there are 3 that testify, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Well, someone adjusted it, adjusted the text. So the older manuscripts have the Spirit, the water, and the blood. And the MacArthur Study Bible says that. It's like, oh, this is, Well, the Mexican pastors got to reading it, went, no, no, no. They got ticked off at MacArthur. And Scofield leaves it in the King James approach of the three testify, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And so they want us to bring them the Scofield Study Bibles, not MacArthur, because they're mad at MacArthur for that one verse, commentary on that one verse. I'm like, okay. And I don't care it's one verse. I don't care. I just want them to have good theological material. If either one of them is good, Scofield has great outlines on the book of Romans, and you know what I'm saying? Like, they're still, as long as they're getting really good, solid information, that one verse is not a deal killer for me. They both teach dispensationalism anyway, which I'm not a dispensationalist. Again, I don't care. I'm more concerned is, do they have John 3:16 right? Do they have Romans 3 right? You know what I'm saying? And there's all kinds of great notes. Scofield and John MacArthur both have incredible notes on Genesis and Exodus and Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. You know what I'm saying? Like, they will be able to preach by having those notes. That's very, very helpful. So I don't care. I'm not a dispensationalist, but I don't care that they are. And so I guess, some people probably view me as being really, like I need to take a stand on this and be more, demonstrative about it or more dogmatic about it. It's just not me. Like, there's things I'll be dogmatic about. Jesus rose again from the dead. And you try to deny that, I'm going to be pretty dogmatic. Yeah. But on how end times are going to unfold where we haven't seen them yet. Now, once we get to heaven, maybe we could be dogmatic for sure then. And then if you're wrong about it, I'll tell you. I'm like, look, I think you're wrong. Look, we saw it happen. But on stuff that hasn't happened yet, we have to be really gracious towards people and kind of work through this together. So, all right. So, okay. So there's really kind of four major worldviews on these things. Preterism that says everything happened in 70 AD. There is premillennial, and premillennialism broken into two groups, either historical premillennialism or dispensationalism. Then there is a third group, postmillennialism, which says we're in the millennial reign of Christ. Amillennialism is more vague. It's like we're in this, none of those, this is all, the book of Revelation is all symbolic. It's all kind of unfolding. It's still unfolding and will ever unfold until Jesus comes back. Amillennialists aren't as, I say this, I think they're more postmillennial, but they're also less optimistic. They're like a pessimistic postmillennial person. Huh? Yeah. They're like, is that fair? They're a pessimistic postmillennial. Yeah. They're like, it's not getting better. All the stuff that's going on in Revelation that led up to this point is still going on, and it's going to keep going on, and it's never going to go away. So that's amillennial. Yeah. All right. So we get to 7, and then okay, so here's the problem. All right, so let me just tell you, here's what happens. You get to Revelation 6 and 7, and you go, where are we? Where are we in this timeline? And you go, well, let me go ask a postmillennial person. Well, they'll give you one timeline. You go, let me go ask a premillennial. They'll give you another timeline where this stuff's taking place, and that's the problem, right? Or in a preterist, they'll give you a third. You have 3 possible timelines with this text, and that makes it difficult, right? Now, the guy I use, Osborne, he's really even-handed on this stuff. I love it. Like, he's super even-handed. Says this. The purpose of this interlude. Now, there's an interlude. Remember, I told you this is another one happens, too, between the 6th and 7th trumpets. Between the 6th and 7th seal and between the 6th and 7th trumpets, there are these interludes, and the interludes seem to be asking, well, the whole world is falling apart, and it's falling apart this way, and this person's doing that, and these people are doing this, and this bad thing's happening here, and some of this stuff is falling back on people who are Christians, and they're feeling the brunt of it. And so then there's this interlude like, okay, well, what happens to the Christians during this time period? And so that seems to be what John's doing, and he repeats it. There's 2 of them. Anytime there's 2 of them, it's like, it seems like we got a pattern here. And it seems like at real critical junctures where the church is really facing a lot of persecution, and the question is what's going to happen to them, John goes, oh, interlude. And the purpose of this interlude comes out of the question at the end of Revelation chapter 6, where it's like, who can possibly stand before the Lamb? Answer, chapter 7. I'll tell you who can stand before the Lamb. There's these 144,000. They're going to go out. They're going to share the gospel. A bunch of people are going to be believers. They're going to go all the way through the tribulation, and they'll come out of the tribulation, and they will stand before the Lamb, and they will praise him. Okay, so that's the interlude. It's kind of this answer to this question, who can stand? And so from Osborne's perspective, John is getting this future glimpse into who's going to be able to stand, who are they, how are they able to stand? Answer. 144,000 people go out as missionaries. They share the gospel. These people come through the tribulation either because they're martyred or they make it all the way through it, and they will stand before the throne of the Lamb, and they will stand in his presence, that kind of idea. And so this interlude is to answer that question. And the same thing happens between the sixth and seventh trumpet, where before we get to the bowls and the bowls of wrath start getting poured out, it's like, how's anyone going to stand? Answer, they overcame, and here's how they overcame, and we have this interlude again. Okay? So we see the pattern that's going on there. So from Osborne's perspective, the purpose of this interlude is to picture the people of God being sealed prior to the outpouring of judgments, and then ultimately in heaven worshiping God after the number of martyrs has been completed. So that is what Osborne says about this. And then he says the following, and this was helpful. He breaks this into 3 scenes, okay? I mentioned to you chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. That's where it's like, hey, who can stand? And the answer is, you see God sealing martyrs who are sacrificed for Christ during the period leading up to and including the Great Tribulation. So this is Revelation 6, 9 through 11. And then we have 7, 1 to 8. These are the saints who are sealed before the Great Tribulation begins. Remember, the winds are held back, the judgment's held back by the 4 angels in the 4 corners of the earth. And what happens there is then these 144,000 go out as like an army, but their army's not with guns or swords or whatever, but with the gospel. And the effect then is we see this victorious believers in heaven who come through the tribulation, and kind of the third scene there. And this is where he's kind of looking historically, futuristically. It's not prophetic. It's not like he's getting prophecy about what will come. It's like he's getting a glimpse of what is going to come. A little different. Like prophecy is, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, this is going to happen. That's not what he's getting. He's just getting like a glimpse of, hey, John, don't worry. There will be people who can stand. Look, we'll give you a glimpse. And he gets a glimpse into the worship before the Lamb. Every tear will be wiped from their eyes. And so remember, we're the martyrs in chapter 6, like what are we going to do? How much longer will you let this happen? All those kinds of things. And the answer is, don't worry, John. This has got an ending where the church gathers before the throne and worships. And these tears will be wiped away permanently. So that seems to be what Osborne thinks the setup is. I read through this quite a bit. There's some case to be made for this, especially when comparing the 2 interludes. I'm not saying it's like for sure, and if you don't believe it, you're wrong. I'm just saying he makes a pretty good case for it. Okay? And I said Osborne is also very even-handed on this stuff, where he'll say things like, okay, some people view it this way, some people look at it this way. So Osborne does a great job of being even-handed on this. All right. Okay, so, boy. He's talking about everyone being sealed through the Great Tribulation, because they're like, how much longer, and can we make it? And this whole promise of God will protect, and this incredible wrath thing, God will protect his people. That's the promise he's making to them. That's what he's saying to John. As this great trouble breaks out on the world, he's going to seal and protect them. And so chapter 7 is like the answer to how that's going to happen and how it's going to work its way out. We have the first 8 verses are like, this group of people, they're going to go out. God's going to hold back his judgment, let them go out and share the gospel with the world. And the end effect will be all of the world, every tribe, every nation will gather before the throne. And John gets to peer into that future event where all of this heartbreak will go away. Every tear will be wiped away. So, like my brother said about his wife, my brother's wife's dying of cancer. And she's been sick for a while, but this is what he said. He goes, this is why Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus. He's like, I guess I'm going to bring him back to this terrible place. And that I don't think this is true, but my brother's viewpoint of that is directly impacted by the fact that his wife is dying of cancer. But he said, this is why Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus, that he knew he was going to bring Lazarus back to this crummy place. And Jesus knew better than anyone about the other place, And so I think for John to be able to see, hey, there is a greater reality. So John, I guess in a way, help the people of God make it through whatever trials and difficulties they're going through, because this is the way the story ends. Maybe said that way. Like there's these moments where it's almost like he's getting this revelation, it's really hard, and God goes, boy, I better give him a glimpse of something hopeful or he's not going to make it. And he's like, look, it ends well. And then he does it again when he gets into the trumpets. So, all right, we're past time. We got to pray and get out of here. God, you are good and gracious. Help us as we work through this text. We believe it's your word. We believe it's true. We want to understand it as best we can. Give us clarity. We pray all these things in the name of Christ Jesus. Amen.